got a chance to do one thing that every team in the country can't do. We got a chance to step up, man. We got a chance to step on the ledge, you know what I mean? And to me, I think it's a free fall. To be elite, you got to think it's a free fall. That means you can't be afraid to go to the edge. And coach said, jump. You said, how far, coach? Where you want me to go? Every guy got a chance to do that today. If you're elite, grab somebody today. Take him with you. There's no more average in this program. There's no more average in this program.
Well, Dan Lanning has a reloaded roster from last year's departures, and the guys that they lost that are significant, it's almost like Oregon's hype is not dropping off at all. But we'll see if they can compete for that Big Ten championship in year one. We're going to discuss that, their schedule, and how they're indeed going to do in the Big Ten here in 2024. But for everybody that hasn't been around here before, I am Colin Bashingle, the host here at Bash's College Football Show. You can find me on the social medias linked down below. And I just ask that you guys comment down below what you think Oregon's going to do in 2024 and also a team that I should do next. And finally, if you like the video, like the video. It helps the algorithm. It helps get it to other people. I would really appreciate it as I keep on trying to grow this small channel. So today, the Oregon Ducks is on deck, requested yesterday, and I'm excited to talk about this team because of how talented they're going to be. But you got to start by talking about the talent that they had lost. Bo Nix, the quarterback that was really good, Heisman finalist, he has gone and off to the NFL, to the Denver Broncos. Running back Bucky Irving, a really good running back that was, very solid in both out of the backfield receiving, but also as a runner, very good. You look at his yards per carry last year, it was right around the 7 mark, I'm pretty sure. It was really elite, and that's what Bucky Irving was. Wide receiver Troy Franklin, gone and off to the next level. He was a big-time player for them as their wide receiver one last year. That role is going to be filled by another guy that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Junior Angelau and Jackson Powers Johnson both going, and they're both interior offensive linemen. Then on the defensive line, Brandon Dorless, the edge guy, and the interior guy, Keon Ware Hudson, they're going to be gone as well. Linebacker Maze Funa is gone, and he was a tackle monster. He was a beast for this defense for sure, and they lost a lot in the secondary that wasn't great last year, and we'll talk about that secondary for this year for Oregon. Losing guys like Kyrie Jackson and Jamal Hill at the cornerback position, Evan Williams, a big-time safety, and Steve Stevens, who helped them with their depth at the safety position. Those are pretty significant losses if you ask me. Just the depth at corner and the depth at safety is a little bit less, but I think they did address that in the transfer portal. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Not too many key transfers to talk about. I think that their running back depth is fine. So Dante Dowdle going off to Nebraska is just a little bit of icing on top. But for the most part, like guys like Chris Hudson to Washington State, Ty Thompson, the quarterback, going to Tulane, nothing significant that I believe that Oregon's losing out into the transfer portal. Like I think everybody that could have came back because they're bought into Dan Lanning's program. And they bring in the quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, as we talk about this roster. And Gabriel last year, a lot of people forget, was the favorite to win the Heisman after the Texas game. He kind of fell off a little bit, but he was definitely still producing, still a really good player. He's got to make sure that in some of these games, he still continues to be a big-time player, even when it's hard to be. At UCF, his criticism was against the good teams. He would always fall off. Then at Oklahoma last year specifically, he played a great team in Texas, made the college football playoff, and he rose to the challenge, ended up being somewhat of a legend at Oklahoma the way that he was able to direct that final drive in the Red River rivalry. But then he had games like the Kansas game last year, for example. He needs to be a lot more consistent for this Oregon team, and I think Will Stein is going to do his best to try to get that consistency out of him. He's going to be throwing it to guys like Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden, but the number one receiver for this team is not going to be Tez Johnson. To me, it's going to be Evan Stewart. Though he didn't produce as much his sophomore year at Texas A&M, due to struggling a little bit with staying on the field, Evan Stewart is a monster when it comes to the talent, and his ceiling is very high. From that class that he was in, I believe that would have been now the 2022 class. I think he was probably the best receiver in that class. So how is he going to be able to live up to the hype? That is going to be the question right there. And they're going to be fine at running back too. You know, you get Jordan James back, you get tight end Terrence Ferguson, and Herbert is also back, so they're great at tight end. Oregon's going to be very good on offense, as they also added in the transfer portal with the offensive tackle Matthew Bedford coming in from Indiana, and he's not going to play tackle at Oregon. He's going to kick inside, I guarantee it, because they do bring back Josh Connerly Jr. and a Johnny Cornelius, the former transfer himself from Rhode Island, that was highly sought after because he's a Sunday NFL tackle for sure. And then Marcus Harper on the inside. The biggest thing is going to be replacing Jackson Powers Johnson at that center position. They got a kid by the name of, I believe it's Lalulu. I think that's how you say it. He's a sophomore, hadn't played much. We'll see if he's ready to step to the occasion at the center spot. On the defensive side of the ball, they did address the transfer portal a little bit. Like they got Jamari Caldwell to help with that defensive line, but they bring back Jordan Birch and Mateo Uiagalelei. Birch comes in from South Carolina a couple years ago after being a little bit of a letdown at South Carolina, and Mateo Uiagalelei comes into year 2 as an absolute beast of a talent, super freak show as an edge rusher. I'm expecting him to be a breakout player for this defense. They're also going to have linebacker Jeffrey Bassa back. I think that they're going to have to answer some questions about the depth at linebacker, but I think they're going to be fine at that position with that type of leadership. But I talked about the concerns of the secondary probably being the most damning for Oregon. Well, that's if they didn't address it in the transfer portal. They got the safety Tysheem Johnson coming back, but who else do they have coming back? Not really much. But they're going to have guys coming in like Jabbar Muhammad. Then you have Brandon Johnson from Duke and Cam Alexander, a solid group of 5 corner, or really good group of 5 corner from UTSA. And then a safety and Kobe Savage coming in from Kansas State. Now, to me, the best one of those 3, I know a lot of people know who Jabbar Muhammad was because he was the number 1 corner on the national runner-ups. Brandon Johnson is a freak, and he's a Swiss Army knife as well. He can do a lot of things. Brandon Johnson is the freak out of the transfers that they got in the portal this year. When you get Evan Stewart, Brandon Johnson going up against each other in practice, they're just going to make themselves better with one another. Iron sharpens iron. I truly believe that. So overall, the Oregon Ducks here, we're going to predict their schedule. And I think that this Oregon team with a win-loss over-under of 10.5 has a good chance to be hovering around that 11-win mark. And we're going to start with a win against Idaho pretty easily right there. Boise State might be a tough game. We're going to have to see what happens in this game, but I think Oregon should be able to run away with it, though I think Boise State's going to be a good team. At Oregon State, as much as I would love for Oregon State to still be relevant, it is what it is, dude. With Jonathan Smith leaving and the Pac-12 dissolving essentially to the Pac-2, that is now Oregon State got left in the dust. I hate it for that program. I thought it was really good that they were becoming relevant, but it is what it is. Jonathan Smith left. He took some guys with him, and other guys left like Damian Martinez, for example, and some other key players for Oregon State. This game should not be close, even if it's in Corvallis. Then you get a win at UCLA, and your eyes might be peeking ahead here. I think they're going to win at UCLA pretty handily. Michigan State might be a tough one. It's a Friday night, but it's a Friday night at home, and they're going to know going into that game that they have 8 days to prepare for Ohio State instead of 7. It's a full rest between Michigan State and Ohio State. You get an extra day, and that's big time, especially because that's a home game. And I've talked about this a lot in the Ohio State video. First big game for Oregon. First big game for Ohio State. They're going to gear up and prepare heavily for one another for this colossal matchup in what would be, I believe, week 7. I'm taking Oregon. I think right now, as we look at it, Oregon is built to be able to beat Ohio State. And they're not going to beat them by a shootout. That's not what they're going to do. Their path to victory here is going to be putting a lot of pressure on the tackles on the offensive side of the ball. And then the big question is, are you going to make Will Howard beat you or Devin Brown beat you, whoever's starting at the quarterback spot? I think Oregon's probably going to game plan to load the box and dare them to beat them. And I think they're going to count on Will Howard or Devin Brown to make a mistake or two. I'm not sure if they will make the mistake or not. I'm back and forth on this game, but I already committed when I made the Ohio State video to Oregon winning. I don't see Ohio State going undefeated. I got Oregon winning this game against the Buckeyes of Ohio State. Then we get a game at Purdue. Now, this is a really tough spot. You're talking about the spoiler makers on the road at Ross Aid 6 days after Ohio State on a Friday night. I think they eke out a win, and the only reason I think that they sneak by this win is just because I don't think Purdue is good enough to beat a team of this caliber right here in this spot. So I do think Oregon survives the tough road trip against the spoiler makers and move on to the Illinois game, in which, again, they might be peeking ahead a little bit. Illinois is not a terrible team, but I, again, just like Purdue, don't think they're good enough to beat Oregon, but this time in Autzen. Now at Michigan, I think they're geared up and motivated to show everybody that they can go into the big house. They can go on the road against these Big Ten teams and win in some of the biggest stadiums in the sport. And I think that that's what they're going to do. Though I think Michigan's still going to be really, really good. The 3 big games on Michigan's schedule is really, really tough. If there is one that Michigan's going to win, it's this one. That is just the truth. I'm taking Oregon, though. I'm trusting that Oregon has the talent, and I am trusting that they're going to be able to go into the big house and throw and run the ball well enough to be able to beat that defense often enough for them to win on the road in Ann Arbor. So up to this point, Oregon is 9-0. I think they beat Maryland back at home pretty easily. If you pay attention here, though, they still haven't had their second bye. After all these long stretches of games, I think that this is where that pressure gives in. It's either going to happen against Michigan or it's going to happen against Wisconsin. If they beat Ohio State, they survive a road test against Purdue. If they are traveling a couple of games to like places like Corvallis and places like Los Angeles to the UCLA game, at some point, this bending will indeed snap for a loss. And that's going to happen against either Michigan in that game that I talked about, or it's going to happen at Wisconsin. And I just so happen to think that Luke Fickell's squad is going to be pretty dang good this year, and they're going to be peaking at the end of the year because this is what Luke Fickell is able to do. If you look back at 2019 at Cincinnati, what Luke Fickell looked like and his team looked like early on in the year was completely different than how they closed the year. And I think that Cincinnati team, who did lose to Memphis twice, but they were playing better football late than they were early on. I think the same thing's happening here at Wisconsin in year 2 under Luke Fickell. And I think Oregon is going to be that program's statement win that Wisconsin is going to desperately need. But then off of the bye, Washington's off the bye too. It's not much of an advantage. The bye week is. I just think Oregon's a better team. They're getting them at home and a massive revenge factor. Kalen DeBoer and all those players might be gone, but you see that W logo. This is your new arch rival. You're not playing Oregon State for conference championships anymore. This is your main rival, and a lot of Oregon fans would argue it's been the main rival. They are going to see that logo, that W. And I believe that hatred that they have for that W is going to be at an all-time high because of the dreams that W ruined last year, even if a lot of those key members are gone and one of them on your team, to be honest with you. I think there is going to be a heck of an indoctrination by Dan Lanning to hate on that logo. And the second that they see it, they're going to crack it, and pound Washington into a pulp. I think that game, though I think Washington's not bad, it's a bad matchup. Oregon's going to get them, and they're going to get them good. Overall, I got the Ducks going 11-1, 8-1 in conference, which is more than likely getting them into the Big Ten championship. What scenarios would keep them out? Well, essentially, they got a head-to-head with Wisconsin that might keep them out, with Ohio State like being 8-1, even though they would have the head-to-head, and then Penn State. Like weird tiebreaker scenarios with 3 or more 8-1 squads that would keep Oregon out. How unlikely is that? It's very unlikely, or highly unlikely that that's going to happen. But you could see a situation where you get like Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, and then a surprise team like a Wisconsin being a jumble at the top. That's the only way Oregon's going to be left out. But not to spoil the other predictions, I'm promising you Oregon's one of the two teams in the conference championship, and probably Ohio State too, who I did the prediction video of. You can go check it out right up there. It got featured earlier in the video. Okay. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hit that like button. Just a final reminder if you made it this far. And for the rest of you, have a good day.